What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. So, President Biden has finally agreed to meet with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to prevent our country from defaulting for the first time ever. And wait for it, they're going to make him wait for it a whole nother week. On May 9th. And this comes as Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has already said that we could default, the entire country could basically not be able to pay its bills on June 1st. So less than 30 days away. And President Biden's going to meet with Kevin McCarthy and make him wait a whole nother week. And this comes as this is really just an initial meeting between Republicans and Democrats, or Biden and McCarthy, to start negotiations. They met back in February for the first time. This is really just a preliminary meeting. They're not going to be able to, finalize stuff here. They're nowhere close to getting an agreement done here. They're a long ways away from having stuff done. Right now, the Democrats' position is, yeah, we don't want to negotiate at all. It should be a clean debt limit bill, which means no negotiations, just raise the debt limit. The Republicans aren't having that. The Republicans are like, no, we want massive cuts across the board, trillions of dollars, $4.5 trillion of cuts over 10 years. This is a significant disagreement here. And remember, even if they just get close to a default, this has happened one time before. The U.S. country, or our country, got its credit downgraded. And that alone caused turmoil in the financial markets. Imagine the U.S. Credit rating getting downgraded. So, your credit rating, the U.S. has a credit rating as well. And when their credit rating gets downgraded, it actually costs the US more money because they have lower credit. So when they get lower credit, the interest on them goes up. Yeah, this is a nightmare, right? Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announces Senate hearings to, quote, expose the GOP debt limit bill starting this week. We know that Democrats hate the bill, but finding a middle ground is going to be difficult. They need to get started on this. Senator Joe Manchin actually, you can see here, Stokes' Democrat fears that he'll run as a third-party candidate. Both Senator Joe Manchin and Senator Kyrsten Sinema are up for re-election in 2024. Remember, senators serve 6-year terms, and only about a third of them come up for re-election every 2 years. Both Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are up for re-election. I think Senator Kyrsten Sinema is very, very vulnerable. I think there's a decent chance that she might not even win the preliminary seat for the Democrats. I think there's a good chance that she could lose her primary. She could lose her primary challenge to another Democrat. You can let me know your thoughts on this. I think that actually could be good for the Democrats because I think Senator Kyrsten Sinema has very small chance of winning her seat again. Just my thoughts. You can let me know your thoughts in the comments. If she gets reelected, I'd be surprised. But there's been other people I thought would never get reelected, and they did. Remember that 95%, somewhere around there, get reelected every single time, somehow, some way. Somehow, so American people sometimes shock me out on some of these things. You can let me know your thoughts. Now, Joe Manchin, I think, has a little bit stronger of a foothold in West Virginia. He's been a senator for a couple times now, and he's a previous governor in West Virginia. West Virginia does normally lean a little bit more red, and now he's a Democrat there, but he leans a little bit more red as a Democrat. Some people would say he's a dino, a Democrat in name only. But we will see. He's going to get some heavy competition from Republicans there for his seat. Remember that the Senate before this term was 50-50, 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans, and was only won by the Democrats because the tiebreaker goes to the vice president. who was Kamala Harris. This time around, it's 51-49, 51 Democrats. So losing one seat either way is very, very important for the Senate breakdown. Losing two seats is even more, detrimental to either party. So we will see here. Now, remember the last time around, the Republicans had more seats up for reelection than the Democrats did. So if you remember, my thoughts were that the Republicans were going to have a harder time taking over the Senate just because of the math. They were going to have to retain all their seats and win over some Democrat seats. And they were not able to take it over. But I don't know who's all up for reelection. I haven't looked at it and done the math yet. It's not for quite a while, but we will see. But my guess is that the Democrats will have a harder time retaining the Senate this time around, but we will see. Speaking of the Senate, they've done a couple interesting things here within the last few days. Senators unveil bipartisan proposal to require the Supreme Court to adopt a code of conduct. This comes as the controversy with Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas not disclosing his luxury trips and basically kind of exposing that Supreme Court justices could almost do whatever they wanted without any oversight and that there wasn't any consequences. And the question here is that going forward, can they do whatever they want without any consequences? Now, whether or not this will pass or not in the House, the Senate, and get the presidency to sign it, and even if it did, would there still be any consequences? And again, what would the consequences be? Kind of interesting. Like, what are they going to do to a judge? Are they going to slap them on the wrist? Are they going to actually kick them out? I would think unlikely, but again, where do we go from here, right? And let me know your thoughts on that. Also here, Senate legislation would cap insulin at $35 per month for people with private insurance. Private insurance. This is a bipartisan bill by Senator Jeanne Shaheen and Republican Susan Collin from Maine. Introduced legislation that would extend the $35 insulin price cap, which is official for Medicare, to people with private insurance. The bill would also aim to rein in pharmacy benefit managers to go between who negotiates insulin prices with manufacturers on behalf of insurance plans, saying, quote, "We are calling on Senate leaderships to bring this bill to the floor for consideration as swiftly as possible." If you remember, in the Inflation Reduction Act, this failed just by a few votes. There was like 2 or 3 Republicans that needed to vote for it more and didn't, and it failed. So this was a tragic loss for millions of Americans because insulin is very, very expensive and is a life-saving drug. Since then, pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly has actually come forward and lowered their prescriptions for insulin to $35. So that does help out a lot of people and was actually very good, very good. Also, Senate Republicans block an equal rights amendment here. Senate Republicans on Thursday blocked a measure that would have allowed the Equal Rights Amendment, ERA, to be added to the Constitution. Remember, there's a whole bunch of amendments to the Constitution. Senators voted 51-47, so it had a majority vote to invoke cloture on a motion to proceed. But remember, you need 60 votes in the Senate. So it actually fell short of the 60 votes needed. Senators Lisa Murkowski from Alaska and Susan Collins from Maine were the only 2 Republicans to vote along with it with every Democrat. So again, you see kind of the separatism of Republicans and Democrats with 2 Republicans there. The ERA passed Congress in 1972, having been first proposed in 1923, Constitutional amendments under law must be ratified by 3/4 of all state legislatures, meaning 38 states. In 2020, Virginia became the 38th state to ratify it, but it did so after 1982 deadline to ratify the amendment had passed. The Senate resolution would have removed the deadline so the ERA could become the 28th Amendment. Senator Ben Cardin and Murkowski were the resolution's lead co-sponsors. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer argued throughout the week that the legislation was needed following the Supreme Court ruling last week that overturned Roe v. Wade, saying, quote, "This resolution is as necessary as timely. America can never hope to be the land of freedom and opportunity so long as half its population is, quote, treated like second-class citizens. There's no good reason, none, for this chamber, this Congress, and this nation to bind itself to limitations set 50 years ago. If you look at the terrible things happening to women's rights in this country, it's clear we must act. To the horror of hundreds of millions of American people, women in America have far fewer rights today than they did a year ago." So let me know your thoughts here in the comments. I will keep you up to date here with everything happening here in our country on a daily basis. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, click the bell icon down below, and thank you for liking and sharing these videos here as well. Here's some videos you should watch next. Here's some massive changes coming for Americans that are on SNAP, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And the United States is on the brink of war with China. That's an exact quote. So click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.